And welcome back, everyone, to the WheelE podcast. I'm your host, Micah Toll, and I'm joined by Seth Weintraub. How's it going, Seth?
I'm good. Thanks.
Awesome. So we've got a bunch of new electric bike, electric motorcycle, all sorts of e-mobility stories to talk about this week. What's the first story on the list here, Seth?
So, Chinese electric moped giant NIU, is it pronounced NIU or new or what?
I always say new because that just rolls off the tongue easier than new, but
Yeah,
we should really ask them at some point.
that's true. All right. The radical new e-bike is set to shake up the US and EU markets. And we know new from like mostly mopeds and even they have a moto, but now they're kind of going down cycle, get it? To e-bikes, a move kind of similar to Livewire Harley with a
Yeah,
serial.
definitely. Yeah, so this is it's a move we've been seeing a lot recently, but it makes a lot of sense for new here because unlike Harley Davidson, who worked with much, more heavyweight motorcycles, New's mopeds are really in the, 50cc, 125cc class. They're small, light electric scooters and mopeds. So an electric bicycle is just, a short skip away from that. And what's interesting is when they decided to design a bicycle, they didn't go with the typical diamond frame setup. They went with a very new type of design here. And I think it's pretty neat. It's got this U shaped step through frame, and it doesn't look like a typical step through bike. It doesn't look like a Dutch bike. It looks a little more sort of futuristic almost. And I like the way they've hidden those batteries in there. I think there's even, if you scroll down a bit, a cool GIF showing off the those two batteries where each one is held on one side of the U. And it's a really neat way to fit a bunch of battery in there. Each one's 480 watt hours, I believe, so almost a kilowatt hour.
And that's the same battery on each one, right? So it like you don't have to figure out this is the front battery, this is the back battery.
Yeah, they're the same batteries, so you could switch them out, or you could even just ride with one, I believe. Though you might have sort of a weird opening in your bike there if you don't have them
Hmm.
both in. But it's a slick design, and even looking past just the design, even though that's the first thing to sort of grab your eye on the parts side, they've got that belt drive there. They've got an integrated rack, so it's built right into the frame. It's not one of these universal racks that's kind of dinky and sort of fits. The headlight follows the same new style where it's that nice halo. And then they're going to have their vehicle app, which works across all of their scooters and mopeds, also integrate with it. So you can determine where your bike is. You can check the charge while you're inside your house and it's out on the street. All of those things are going to be available as well. So it's neat that they can, leverage a lot of the technology they've already developed and implement it on a much smaller vehicle.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of neat stuff about this bike. It looks like a Gates belt drive.
I don't know if it's actually Gates or not. They haven't announced the supplier. There are other, belt drive makers out there, and at this price, they're looking at $1,500.
Oh
I'd be
wow.
pretty impressed if they could get Gates on there, but they've got huge scale, so maybe they can.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff. Like I noticed the handlebars are kind of bent back. That's a little bit of a Dutch style there. Um, as well as the wheels are kind of they're big and probably soften the road up a little bit, but there's no suspension, so that's the trade off, I guess. Looks like
Right?
a
Yeah, I
really
think they're. Sorry, go on.
no, it just looks like a really like well put together bike, well thought out.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with it. It's not their first stab at a bike. A couple years ago, they had sort of a chunkier looking concept that I'm not sure if they actually brought to production. But for a second stab at a bike, this one
Hmm.
I think they've really knocked it out of the park. And with their manufacturing scale, I mean, they did 1 million vehicles last year. That's just, I mean, compared to anything in the U.S. Electric bike market, they could come
Right.
in and just totally redefine the space. And at that price point, $1,500, I mean, that's like a shot across Rad Power Bike's bow right there, right?
Right. I mean, that's a serious bike for $1,500.
Yeah, so I'll be excited when they bring these in. I think it's around the middle of the year, summer sometime, that they're looking at at rolling these out, though I'm not sure we have an exact date yet. But whenever they have these first models, we're definitely going to get one to review, and I'm excited to see how this thing rides because just by the looks on the spec sheet, it's pretty impressive.
Oh yeah, so back to that spec sheet. Two batteries. You said 500 watt hours each.
Yes, each one 480, and then the motor itself is 500 watts. Though there's going
Okay,
to be a 250-watt version, so people
for
in Europe
Europe.
can still enjoy the bike.
And is that a 500 watt nominal? Peak of 600, or
Right. I'm not sure if they've declared whether that's a peak or a continuous rating. With
okay,
the speeds that they're looking at, it's supposed to be a class 3 bike, so 28 miles per hour, 45 kilometers per hour. I'm guessing 500 watts would be the continuous, so that it peaks up more like 750. Because
okay.
to get up to 28 miles an hour, that takes a bit of power.
Yeah. And do you think this will be open to uh, some, some editing on the controller, or is this going to be pretty locked down?
Because they sort of have their own proprietary software and system, I doubt that there's going to be a lot of modifications that they're going to allow customers to do. Some e-bike companies, they sort of promote that, right? Like it's an open secret that you can go in and make
Hmm.
changes. But I'm guessing that New is going to want to retain more control over what people are doing with these vehicles.
All right. One last question on this one. That rack looks super strong on the back. Is there going to be like a seat and a peg option, do you think? Or is this just going to be a single rider situation?
I'm not Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't seen any peg options. You're right though, it does look really sturdy. So I could see them coming out with something like that, especially because it would be within sort of the DNA of
Right.
New, that they're very much, passenger carrying vehicles, but we haven't seen any, accessories for passenger kits or anything like that.
All right. Looks really exciting. I 1,500 bucks. Geez, kind of.
Right?
If you're gonna spend 1,500 bucks on a bike, that looks like a pretty nice package. Um, and you should spend 1,500 bucks on a bike. But anyway, uh, next story. Biktrix Moto review: a fun moped-style electric bike that can cruise for days on a charge. So obviously a big battery pack here. Biktrix, we're kind of excited about. They have some other bikes that are like the Juggernaut, that are full, 26-inch wheels. Um, and they have, like, I think those are Bafang Ultras on those, right?
Yeah, they've got either Ultras or BBS HDs, though I think they have multiple Ultra models.
Anyway,
They've got a really wide lineup.
this one does not have that. It's got a rear hub motor, but tell us about it.
Yeah, so this is very much like a motorcycle with pedals style bike. It's the moped format that we often think of associated with brands like Super 73 because they make it kind of ubiquitous. But it's very much the high handlebars, long bench seat. It almost feels like you've got ape hangers on there. Like your hands are up at shoulder height when you're riding around. Yeah, it
Yeah.
gives you that real sort of California cruising feeling to it. And this one is just a blast. I mean, it's you got to embrace that it's basically a motorcycle, right? Like
Uh-huh.
it's not a lightweight bike. It's not a nimble little folder. It's for getting that, moped style feeling. And in that sense, I mean, this thing just it crushes it. Like it is just so much fun to ride. I think it's marketed like 28 miles per hour. I had trouble getting it up past like 25 or 26. Maybe like, when the battery's fully charged, you get the full 28. But even at, 25, 26 miles per hour, it feels plenty fast. And with those big tires, you get that tire roar going. There's a lot of bike moving down the road.
And what is the motor on that?
It's a 750 watt,
Okay.
and that's probably one of those like wink wink, it's really
Right.
pulling like 1,000, 1,100 watts.
Okay. And then lots of battery on this one. What's the specs there?
Yeah, so you can get the 1 or 2 battery option. The one I tested had 2 batteries, and they're 48 volt, I think 21 amp hours each. So a little bit over a kilowatt hour. So 2 kilowatt hours combined. They say that's a maximum of 100 miles of range, 50 miles per battery. If you're pedaling, maybe, I
Yeah.
definitely didn't see 50 miles per battery, but even, at 25 miles per battery, which is pretty reasonable for a 1 kilowatt hour battery, that's still a 50-mile e-bike, without pedaling, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I think when this obviously reminds me a little bit of the Hyperscorpion too. Um, not form factor necessarily, the different way, but just specs wise, having two kilowatt or two separate kilowatt hour batteries, um, and that form factor. I don't think people want two batteries to go 100 miles. I think they want two batteries so they can go full throttle for an hour, so they can go 30 miles. Um, at least I can say for me, that's why I have the extra battery there. Um, so looks like a lot of fun. Suspension as well. Um, is that rear suspension or just
Yeah,
front?
this one only has the front suspension,
Okay.
but with those fat tires, you get a pretty decent cushion in the back if you don't, overinflate them.
Hmm.
The other cool thing about this one is that it comes in two frame sizes. So this one has 20-inch wheels, but they have a 24-inch wheel version.
Hmm.
And that answers what is probably the biggest complaint I see on mopeds is that the smaller frame doesn't fit larger riders. So they have that big option, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, I mean that. Yeah, it fits a lot of stuff on there. What is the retail price, and what is like, can you get it on sale? What's the deal there?
Yeah, so this one I think it starts at 2300 and then and that's the single battery version.
Hmm.
I don't recall I think it's probably another 400-ish or so bucks for the second battery.
So
So 20
compares to the Hyperscorpion too, pretty well there.
Yeah, it's competing in the same class. It's above the sort of entry level mopeds like the Super 73 ZX and maybe the Aerial Rider X class, but it also has some nicer components like if someone goes back and watches the review video, I showed a comparison of a headlight, and it's a 1500 lumen headlight, so it actually
Oh wow,
lights up the road. Like it's not one of these little be seen by car
right,
lights. Like it just turns night into day. It's got very nice hydraulic brakes. It's only a single speed, which at that price I would have loved to have seen even like a six-speed derailleur on it, just so that, if
right,
you ever ran out of battery, it would be a little easier to pedal, though it is geared pretty low. If anything, I'd say that it was a bit tricky to, keep up with it at the higher speeds. Really, it's, if your battery does run out, you can pedal it at like 7, 8 miles an hour. But once you get above 15, you can't really spin your feet fast enough to keep up.
right, right. Yeah, and that makes it tricky when you're trying to do like class one, situations.
Right. So, multi-speed derailleur could have been a nice addition, especially at
Right,
this price. I mean, it adds a little bit of weight, but this is already, I think it says 90 pounds there. What's another half pound when the
right.
bike weighs that much?
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things where like I almost never ever change my gears on any of the bikes like this that for me it's the Hyper Scorpion. It has a full gear set. I'm always in the highest gear, which is like it just seems silly to even mess with that. But in that rare instance where you have to drive slow, maybe you're on a bike path or something, it is nice to not have to go really slow with your pedaling. That's a cool
Yeah,
bike.
definitely.
I like this one. All right, let's move on a little bit. All right, switching gears a little bit. We're gonna watch the Tesla Model S Plaid take on a Harley-Davidson electric motorcycle in the quietest drag race ever.
Yeah, this one, it's funny because we've seen before a Harley
Up next on the
Livewire
Tesla Pledge.
Hmm.
versus Tesla drag race. And I think the last time we saw one of these, it was a Model 3 Performance, and the live wire just edged it out. Like it was a photo finish, but the live wire beat it. But this time against the Model S Plaid, like it was over before it started.
Yeah,
I mean, how
it,
many horsepower is
it's
in
like
the
a
Model
thousand.
S Plaid?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just absurd. And it's the Model S Plaid isn't the only vehicle right now with close to 1,000 horsepower. The Lucid's pretty close up there. And
Yeah,
some more
so
coming out.
the Livewire, it's quick. It has a 0 to 60 mile an hour in 3 seconds. I've done it, and it's very quick. But that doesn't compare to something like the Model S
Oh yeah.
Plaid. There's
Bye.
just yeah. I mean, it was a nice little exhibition, but I don't think anyone was placing bets on the Livewire in this matchup.
Yeah, and the live wire even beat it off the line. It wasn't even like it kind of looked like the live wire was standing still.
Yeah,
Um the live wire has wheelie control, right? Is
yeah,
that
definitely.
that's
So,
does that slow it down at all?
I mean, I think it depends what the traction situation is like,
Right.
because certainly you don't want to be lifting the front end up and losing control. But I think here it's more like how much power can you actually get to the ground, especially with having four wheels powering the Tesla and having just one a single powered wheel on the live wire. I don't think it was as much wheelie control as it was just how quickly can you put that power down.
Yeah. I wonder so we recently reviewed the Aerial Grizzly, which is a all-wheel drive, which is two bike. I wonder because electric makes it a little easier to have a all-wheel drive bike. I wonder if any of the motorcycle manufacturers are toying with that. Have you seen any all-wheel drive bikes, like motorcycle bikes?
I've seen concepts for a few. I think at one point there was even talk, I forget which manufacturer it was, maybe it was BMW even several years ago, about like a hybrid setup, having like a front wheel motor and then a gas engine drivetrain on the rear. But
Oh,
there
interesting.
not that I know of, are there any production all-wheel drive electric motorcycles right now. It would be
I
super
mean,
easy though, you're right.
it would be much easier. There'd be a little bit more weight in the front for steering and stuff, but I guess it's really not something you need day to day. It's more like that one time that you're on the track. So it would be cool to make
Yeah.
a track bike. I wonder if you could probably like hack up a Harley and do that or something.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting experiment. I mean, in the twisties, I think you'd regret it when you're trying to turn a bike that has that big, heavy front wheel.
Right,
And even like on a track, I mean, I think you'd still need to keep most of the power in the rear wheel because that front
right.
one would have less traction on it.
Yeah,
But it'd be a fun like Franken project.
right. Well, it would also put more weight at the front.
That's
Might be
true,
good. All right, that's mostly just eye candy, really.
yeah.
And all right, so new 20 mile per hour momentum e-bikes.
Yeah, so Momentum, it's a sub brand of Giant, or I guess it's a sister brand because Giant is owned by Giant Group, and
Okay.
Giant Group also has Momentum here. So these are a couple of nice sort of urban commuter slash road bikes. There's one of them has the flat bar style like you see there, and then they also have a drop bar version, which is kind of nice. I'm not a
Hmm.
huge drop bar guy. I know a lot of people like to get into that tuck and enjoy the drop bars, so it's nice that they have both of those options. And these are pretty slick bikes. I mean, they don't look electric until you sort of like get up there and start examining them. And they're just nicely designed. The price is a little bit high for I think those are hub motor bikes. So we're looking at like 2,300 for that flat bar yellow bike and 2,700 for the green drop bar bike. And the production looks great. The components are higher end. Though I know like the Lycra folks are going to tell me that those are like mid tier at best derailers and such, but it's certainly a lot nicer than the bargain basement Shimano Acera parts that we see on a lot of
Right.
electric bikes. So these are nicer components, nicer brakes, still Kenda tires, but that's fine for us normies. We're not on the Tour de France circuit.
Yeah, so these are like gravelish bikes, you would say.
Yeah, I mean
But
they could sort of do dual role like that. I think that, very much like that sort of crossover city touring, trekking, line blurring bikes would be where these fit in best.
so I'm not seeing a lot of power. Like the battery thing is pretty low, is pretty thin, which obviously helps it, camouflage the electric part of the bike. The motor looks a little small. What are the specs here?
Yeah, so these are 250-watt motors. I don't recall off the top of my head the battery size. It's probably in the 250 watt hour range because you're right that it just isn't a very thick down tube. But
Yep.
these are also pedal assist bikes, right? So you're going farther with that same energy. The back of the envelope math is that pedal assist gets roughly twice the range as throttle riding. It depends how fast you're going, but it's the quick and dirty. So a pedal assist bike that has a 250 watt hour battery is probably going to get somewhere around the same range as a 500 watt hour e-bike, which is closer to average. So they're a little small on the power and the battery capacity, but they're fitness bikes too. So you're not expecting it to do all the work for you.
Yeah, I really like that. And my daily driver is kind of I wouldn't call it a fitness bike, but it's it's an old 2017 Rally Redux IE. Same specs though, 250 watt motor, similar size tires. So this is kind of right up my alley in terms of daily driver. One last important question: Class 1 or Class 3 here?
I'm pretty sure these are class one.
Okay, so it's garbage.
Yeah.
No, I'm a big fan of the Class 3s. Um, so Class
Yeah.
1 means it tops out at 20 miles per hour, and then the motor cuts off.
Yeah. So, these are again, your sort of fitness, you're not trying to like blast your way to work kind of thing. I agree, class three, 28 miles an hour would have been great. When I'm commuting, I'm usually doing 28, 30, whatever my bikes top out at, a little bit over
Right,
the limit. So I prefer those faster speeds, especially when I'm with cars. But as sort of a fitness bike, I guess they're assuming that people are going to be all right with normal fitness speeds, which I think
right.
20 miles an hour on a non-electric bike is considered pretty decent.
Yeah, and I noticed so there's no display on the handlebars, but there's this little black thing on the top tube. What is that an actual LCD or is that just something
I
else?
think it's Yeah, I think it's LED, so it's very simple. It's a
Okay.
single button, and then I think it's got like a light ring around the button that depending what color it is, that tells you your battery, whether it's like 80%, 50%, 25%, that sort of thing.
Yep.
And then I think when you press the button, it'll flash a certain number of times to give you your pedal assist mode. So it's super minimalist. You don't even get a real screen readout, which I could see going either way. I kind of like the stealthiness of it, that it just doesn't scream e-bike with a big, 4-inch screen on the
Right.
handlebars. But I can see some people saying, I'm paying 2,000 something dollars, give me a screen.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so this is a pretty like I like this package. It's kind of a camouflage. Is there a name for that? Like an e-bike that is meant to look like a regular bike? Do we
I
have
tend to go with like a stealth e-bike. The problem is
stealth?
there's a company called Stealth
Right.
e-bikes, so that can get confusing. And also their bikes are not stealthy at all. They're like 3,000, 5,000 watt motorcycles
Right.
with
The
pedals.
like stealth bomber kind of thing.
Exactly. So it gets even more confusing.
Okay. One last thing. The brake size, is that 180 or is it looks a little smaller maybe?
Oh man, I don't recall off the top of my
Okay.
head.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there. It
No
looks
worries. I don't have the spec sheet here.
yeah, so uh great package all around. Let's take
Yeah,
a look
I'd love to
here.
see more bikes like this. We see a lot of these high power, high speed e-bikes, but these stealthy sort of low power fitness e-bikes. I'd love to see more of those.
Yeah, and so Giant was having some issues delivering. Are these going to be available or when are they going to be available?
I think it's going to be a few months. I was trying to get one to review, and they're not available yet. So I think it's probably a few months out.
All right, so they're still straightening out their supply chain. All right, OKAI. So another one. Is it, am I pronouncing that right? OKAI, 37 mile per hour scooter.
I go with okay, but again, I think it's because it just sounds more familiar to me.
Right. All right. Okay. So I'm actually not a huge fan of these crazy scooters. They scare the crap out of me. Um, Even like riding a Lime scooter uh, at its full speed is like I don't feel comfortable on that. Whereas I'll ride a bike like 60 miles per hour. So tell me about this one.
Yeah, so I'm like halfway to where you are. These high-powered standing scooters like this, I mean, you're looking at, 1800 watts. That's crazy powerful. 60 kilometers an hour, like 37 miles an hour. These things are just like they're basically small motorcycle specs in a standing scooter, like a glorified Lime scooter. I say glorified Lime scooter, but obviously it's much nicer suspension, better tires, better components, but still, these things do give me a bit of pause. At the same time, they're a lot of fun to ride if that's the thrill you're looking for. Like there's something about traveling at those speeds while standing up that just gives like a different type of rush. It's hard to explain. I don't surf, but I imagine if I did, it would
Yeah.
be kind of like a similar feeling that like, you're just standing up and just flying like, at speeds you wouldn't normally be in that position.
Yeah, it's weird. Like even just looking at a scooter with a seat, it feels like, you don't have control over the actual vehicle as well when you're just standing on it versus like, having, kind of like the seat between your legs. You can kind of like, I don't know, it just feels like you have better control over the vehicle if you're turning a little bit and you hit a pothole or something. Also, I did I don't know if you remember, but I did crash pretty hard on that wide wheel at Interbike at the last Interbike.
Oh,
So
I do
maybe
remember that.
that's
Yeah.
part of my fear.
Yeah, I remember that vividly, though. That was like a very graceful dive you took, if I may say
Thank
so.
you. I appreciate that. It
Yeah, so
didn't feel graceful, but
well, you saved it pretty well. He was back up on his feet in like a second. So
well,
yeah, these standing scooters, I think that, for people like us who are very much e-bike people, it feels a little counterintuitive to be standing, but there are some people that swear by standing scooters. They get the Dualtrons that go 50, 60 miles an hour, and that's how they get everywhere. Like to them, that's the most like natural way to ride a two-wheeler. And I guess it's whatever you start on, that feels, like your foundation.
right.
I'm
And
still like sorry, go on.
I was gonna say the battery on this one, does it pull out or is it fixed?
Uh, to be honest, I'm not sure. A lot of these larger battery scooters are starting to do that. It wasn't very common before, but we're starting to see a little more of removable batteries on these big scooters, which is nice because, I mean, these things usually weigh like 70, 80 pounds. So
Yeah.
bringing them in to charge, especially if you're in an apartment, can be tricky. So I'd love
Yeah,
to
and
see if they can.
yeah, and OK is the OEM for a lot of scooters. Maybe we've seen at bike companies, and those sometimes have removable batteries. Um, so is this kind of like I've noticed a lot more. Maybe it's press releases and stuff, but I've noticed OK's been kind of out there with their own brand a lot more recently. Is that something you're seeing?
Oh yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. So for years now, they've been, the OEM, like you said, like those scooters you're looking at there is basically a Lime scooter, and I think they supply that model to other companies as well. But in the last year or so, they've actually been producing vehicles under their own name and promoting their own brand. So instead of just doing the B2B business to business, now they're doing business to consumer as well, and they're getting their own name out there, which I think is great because they've produced these awesome vehicles that other companies have put their names on for years. And it's about time that started producing their own models and getting credit for the cool two wheelers that they've been developing.
Yeah, and they have some e-bikes as well, right?
Yeah, they've got a bit of everything. I think they're mostly scooters, but they've got several models of e-bikes. The Lime and Jump e-bikes look pretty similar to some of the OK models. So I'm not positive that that's the supplier, but it looks pretty close. So I wouldn't be surprised.
All right, next story. After a warning and F rating from Better Business Bureau, electric scooter and e-bike company GoTrax responds. So what's going down here?
Yeah, so I started getting a lot more emails over the last few weeks and months from people saying that they had bought a GoTrax scooter, something happened, and they just can't get in touch with customer service. And I often get these emails from just about every company, like even the good companies. People email me and be like, "This company should be out of business." But when they start really stacking up for just one company, and I kept seeing GoTrax, GoTrax, GoTrax all the time in my inbox. It's like, all right, well, something different's happening here. So around that time, I also got a bulletin from the BBB that they had just given GoTrax an F rating, which is pretty bad, I have come to learn. And so I reached out and was like, it sounds like you guys are falling apart. Do you want to, maybe provide a comment? And to their credit, they sat down with me and they just basically spilled all. And they said, yeah, we didn't realize that the reviews on the BBB had gotten so bad. And then once they gave us that rating, we went back and looked, and it was like, yeah, we've got to make some changes. So they went through a lot of the different changes they're working on making. One of the things they've done is they've increased their customer service team from, it was down to like 4 people at one point, so they're up to 29 now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's a big change, but I mean, as a large electric scooter company, you can't have just 4 people on
Yeah.
customer service. That's ridiculous. So they're increasing their customer service team. They've just implemented phone service, which kind of is the differentiator between like a so-so online company and a legit, like there's someone there to pick up the phone when you have a problem company.
Hmm.
So I'm glad to see that they just last week started doing phone customer service in addition to the email service. They've redesigned several of their scooters, and they have a new model coming out that they said is basically totally redesigned based on customer feedback. The parts that people said were failing or that they didn't like or wanted to see updated. So it sounds like they're making actual improvements in their process. They're improving the product, and they're trying to make things right. They said they've gone back to every complaint that was filed through the BBB, and they've actually gotten most of those resolved. So now, if you go back to the Better Business Bureau's page on them, you can see that a lot of those now say resolved by the customer, and the customer is the one that has to go and do that. So it sounds like they're actually following through. This isn't just paying lip service.
Hmm. And you said one of the new customer support managers is or previously ran an Apple remote service team. So obviously, kind of the gold standard in customer service. That's
Yeah,
pretty good.
definitely. It sounds like they're trying to find the right people to improve on what they realized was obviously pretty poor service. So if anything, I was impressed that they were just so they took ownership over their mistakes, and they weren't trying to just brush things under the rug and say like, oh yeah, there were some issues, but things are different. They really accepted what was wrong and have made concrete steps to improve it, which I think is important.
Yeah. And did the BBB upgrade their thing yet?
They're
Like the rating?
still at an F, but their rating, like the how many stars out of 5 stars, I think they're up to like a 3.5 or something. And they said their goal is to get to 4.5. So they're moving in the right direction. They'd been at like a 1 point something out of
Oh,
five.
wow.
So the customer rating is definitely improving. So that's a good sign. But they're still at an F rating from the BBB. I don't know how they update that. Though I did get a lot of emails from people telling me that the BBB is basically just like a private, you know, business, businessmen's club, and they support their members, and whoever doesn't pay the fee doesn't get the good ratings.
I've
I
heard
don't know
similar.
enough about, yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe the BBB rating comes with some caveat, but I don't think it's something you can just throw away. It's still a lot of consumers reviewing companies on an independent platform.
Right. Yeah, it seems like everything's corrupt. Amazon reviews, don't trust them. BBB, I don't know. Anyway, uh, good to see that company making some amends there. All right, Podbike to begin delivering its four-wheeled enclosed electric bike car later this year. So I have this weird fascination with pod or these things. So tell us about Podbike.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one. Essentially, I guess you'd call it a velomobile. I mean, it's an enclosed bicycle. It's a four-wheeler, and it's got an interesting drivetrain. Technically, it's a four-wheeled electric bicycle, but it doesn't have a chain drive or a belt drive or any mechanical connection between the pedals and the drive wheels. It's just a generator, and it's essentially a drive-by-wire system. So it's really kind of neat in that way, and it uses two different motors. One motor is essentially driven based on, I guess it just powers up to 250 watts, and that's the limit. So the more you pedal, the more it puts out. But the second until the 250-watt limit. But the second motor is supposed to be tied to essentially what you would be producing if you were pedaling through a mechanical drivetrain. So that one actually can put out more than 250 watts. It's kind of a weird setup, but I think it's a loophole to get around the 250-watt limit, because it's essentially saying we have one, e-bike motor, and we have the other one that's just putting out whatever you put out with a electric connection in between, instead of a
Right.
mechanical connection.
Yeah, it does sound like a loophole mobile. So a lot of stuff about these vehicles because they are enclosed and lower. They have a much better aerodynamic, uh, I guess, footprint than a traditional bike or even just bikes that are open air. Um, does that make this thing go a lot faster at high speeds, or is that with just human and 250, are you even going to get to 30 miles per hour, say?
So they said it tops out at 60 kilometers an hour, which is 36 or 37 miles an hour. And I think the only way they can do that is being as aerodynamic as it is,
Right,
because I mean, it looks like a fighter jet canopy, right?
right. It looks super cool. And
Yeah,
and
so
it's
it's,
obviously also great for weather, right?
oh, absolutely. I mean, this is, certainly great for Northern Europe, Scandinavian countries. I mean, this is a much better way to get around than a bicycle in the winter. And especially not just, protecting you from rain and snow, but when you're in icy conditions, a four-wheeler, worst case scenario, you're just going to spin instead of falling over and falling off your bike.
Right.
So this is what I would want, commuting in the winter by bike, or, by a funny version of a bike anyways.
And the power by wire, that kind of makes it easier to kind of enclose so you're not kicking up any rain or snow from like the drivetrain. I should probably scroll down, but is there anything like, is it watertight from the bottom?
Yeah, it seems to be sealed from the bottom. We've seen some of these before, like the Elf that were open on the bottom, though there
Hmm.
were like floor kits. But this one, it seems like they've really done a good job of making it more like a car interior. Now, it doesn't have the bells and whistles, and there are a few things you can pay extra for, like I think carpet is one of the
Ooh,
upgrades.
fancy.
So yeah, I don't know if that comes in like low pile or shag, but they've got a few little upgradable options to make the interior a little bit nicer. But even like the base level stock version seems to be at least fully enclosed and like a good starting point. It's not like those ones where you got to pay extra to add a floor or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, it's pretty cool. So this is obviously a European, creation. Do you think this will be coming stateside anytime soon?
It's a good question. It would have certain legal ramifications in the US, because I don't think a four-wheeler is going to be classified as a bike in many places,
Hmm.
because electric bicycles fall under bicycle designation in the US at least, and that means two or three wheels. So
Right.
when you get into four-wheelers in a lot of states, it's not going to be a bicycle anymore. So you might be like a low-speed vehicle at that point, maybe like a gem or
Right.
a golf cart even. I'm not sure what the ramifications would be for that.
It doesn't look like it would be rocket science, so to speak, to make this a three-wheel vehicle. Like the back wheels seem closer together, and they're kind of like it almost seems like it could be a three-wheeler if they
Yeah,
wanted to.
I think that would be an easier way to enter the US market because then, you'd definitely be an electric tricycle right from the beginning, and then it would
Hmm.
just, fall under all the bicycle laws. It might cut into the storage back there. It's actually got a little trunk, or
Okay.
you can, instead of the cargo compartment, you can have a small child seat back there. Probably not too large of a child,
Right.
but going with the three wheeler is definitely going to cut into that. Though you would get a cool teardrop shape to it. It'd be even more aerodynamic, I imagine,
Right.
as a three wheeler.
Yeah. And they theoretically could put more powerful motors in there as well, which would probably get it up to like, 50 miles per hour, something absurd.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing is with these enclosed designs, it only takes a little more power to get those higher speeds. You're not fighting the wind quite as much as an open bike or even a recumbent bicycle.
Right. I mean that to me is the really cool part. Like, um, we've seen these like almost I think they're almost completely human powered velomobiles that go, 40, 50 miles per hour just by human power, just because, you almost have zero wind resistance.
Yeah, it's
S-
almost like cheating at physics.
right. You're skipping all the wind. Or you're like biking in space. Anyway, so cool. I'd like to see more of these kind of things. Glad that they're doing it. All right, and the last story. Here's how Ride One Up developed its fast and affordable cafe cruiser two-passenger e-bike. Oh, I also like this one.
Yeah, so this is a really exciting one. People responded really well when we first covered the news that this was announced. And so I went back and talked to the company a bit more about the development. And it's interesting because while there are many electric bicycle companies that produce a whole array of styles of e-bikes, again, like it's easiest to pull rad power bikes out of the air because they're like the prime example, but they've got their cargo bikes, their city bikes, metro bikes, utility bikes, fat tire bikes. They do everything. On the other end of the spectrum, you have companies like Ride One Up that are uber specialized in one area. And for Ride One Up, it's commuter bikes, like something that's going to get you to work and home. And they've got like 4 or 5 different models, and that's all they do. And they do it really well. Like great bang for your buck, very nicely designed commuter bikes. And so when they went and produced or rolled out this prototype for a sort of a cruiser cafe racer style bike, it was like out of left field because it's not like anything they've done before. But it's a really cool concept because it takes sort of the efficient commuter bikes that they've been working on for years, and it adds in all the utility of a passenger carrying bike. So if someone was going to get a moped for that reason, but they didn't want the big fat tires and they didn't want the 20-inch wheels, they wanted something that felt a little more, cruiser bike-ish. This definitely answers that. So it was interesting to learn a little bit more, and it's funny because so many more things went into the design than I thought about. Even things like packaging for shipping these bikes, because that's a huge expense for e-bike companies. It's depending on the bike, it can be $100 or more just to ship these once it gets to the U.S. And so they actually had to design it with the box in mind so they could fit it into a small box because it's a much bigger bike than they're used to working in. And then there's the high capacity rear rack that I think it's rated to something like 130 pounds, so it can carry a decent sized passenger, a small adult. And then if it's rated to 130 pounds, that they
I
had
was
to
just gonna
put like a
say,
200-pound person.
right? Yeah, if it's rated to 130, you can put much more on it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
So it's
just such a cool idea, like to actually make that rear passenger a kind of a fixture of the bike.
Right. And I think, we talked about this a little before, but one thing that I'm curious about is how it handles with that much weight up that high when you've got a passenger back there. And that, we'll only be able to tell once we can get one of these for testing, which is probably going to be several more months. There's no clear timeline on this yet, though I think it's going to arrive before one other bike of theirs that is still like a year later not available yet, which is their Prodigy,
Hmm.
and that's a their first mid-drive bike. All the other bikes they've done are hub motor bikes, which of course is very common with these sort of value-priced e-bike companies. Most of their
Hmm.
bikes are in the 1,000 to 1,700-ish dollar range, which it's hard to get into mid-drives at that price.
Right. Um, yeah, awesome bike. Looks like a lot of fun. It should be popular if they can deliver them. All right, so that's the last story. We should visit the comment section. A lot of people saying hi and um, 8 a.m. on a Saturday, 5 a.m. Pacific. You guys are crazy. Obviously, this person gets up early if they're in Pacific. We did get a super sticker, which thank you for the tip. I guess we'll uh, we'll take it. Um,
Awesome. Planet Tierra. Nice.
yeah, from New Brunswick, which I believe is kind of chilly right now. Um, that's that's pretty far up north in Canada there. Um, so probably not on bikes these days. Uh, golf cart and humans all over the streets. That's pretty much the only comment. We probably should have called it out, but if you guys do have any comments or questions, you guys can always put them in the comments, and we'll answer them during the show. But that's pretty much it for today.
Awesome. Well, we'll be back fortnightly, right, Seth?
Yeah, so I guess next time you'll see us at the end of January or beginning of, I guess, 2 weeks from now would be the 29th. So you can probably put that on the calendar.
Awesome. Well, we'll have a whole pile of new top e-bike and electric motorcycle and all sorts of mobility stories by then.
All right, sounds good. We'll see you 2 weeks, everyone.